everyone, this is Jeannie Zhang, the estate planning attorney. We're based in Texas, but we can handle estate planning for all 50 states. Some of our clients might know that what happened to Kitty last week. Kitty's father passed away just recently, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm sure that you must be very busy at the funeral arrangement and taking care of your father's estate. Yep. How's everything going so far?
So, not well. And I want to talk to our clients about a little bit of a cautionary tale on this one. So my father actually passed without any form of estate planning. I had spoken with him about doing estate planning, and we had a plan that we were going to do it in April of this year, but he passed on his birthday, February 18th of this year. So it kind of puts a little bit of a bind on us as his children to try to work together and kind of figure out what to do. So one of the first things that you have to worry about when you have a family member that passes is you have to realize that for most things, if you don't have an estate plan, so if you don't have a will, you don't have a living trust, the first thing you have to worry about is you have to wait for the death certificate. Mm-hmm. You can't really access bank accounts, you can't access utilities or things like that, you can't do anything with the title on the house or anything like that until you have those death certificates.
You can't even start the probate proceeding.
Correct.
You can't actually do anything without a death certificate.
Correct. So you can't go to the court and get the court to begin anything with probate until you have a death certificate. Now, typically, a lot of people haven't thought about this, typically it takes between 2 and 4 weeks to get a death certificate. So in our particular case, it's actually taking longer. And the reason that it's going to take longer is because Dad was living in a small town in Texas, and the person, according to the city charter, that is supposed to issue the death certificate and be the medical examiner for the county is the Justice of the Peace Precinct 1. Dad didn't plan his death, so he didn't know that 2 days before he died, Justice of the Peace Precinct 1 was going to be elected via a runoff election in the small town that he lives in. So what that means is that person that's going to have to sign the death certificate and certify that my father has passed has not yet received paperwork from Austin. So they told us that it's going to take probably 6 weeks, maybe up to 8 weeks to be able to get the death certificate.
Almost 2 months.
Almost 2 months.
So everything is just freezed. You can't do anything right now.
Correct.
Without getting the death
certificate. So correct. So my father actually had a bank account in which he had saved money for his funerary arrangements and everything with that. However, because we don't have a death certificate, we can't get access to the bank account. And because none of the children were on the bank account, it wasn't a payable on death account, and because he hadn't done estate planning to create a living trust, we're not able to access those funds. So when the bill came due, we planned out everything as he wished.
Yeah,
when the bill came due,
paying for that? That's the question.
When the bill came due, I paid for it. I was thankful that I had the ability to be able to do that. My siblings actually couldn't. So if we had not been able to pay for the funeral arrangements as he wanted, I'm not really sure what exactly we would have done. But thankfully I was able to pay for it and cover that.
Well,
now,
you're a great daughter. But I think it's not your dad's desire to make you to pay for it or put anyone in this situation.
Correct. His stated goal in having that bank account that had the amount of money in it that would cover those arrangements was he didn't want any of us to go into debt or have any sort of issue paying. And so his intent was to have this account with more than enough money to be able to cover any arrangements that we would need so that he could protect us from having to worry about it. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. So thankfully, we were able to cover it.
What's going to happen to your bank account if you die without will is if your family member goes to the bank, they wouldn't be able to get any access to the bank account.
Unless they're named on the bank account.
Exactly. They wouldn't be able to know how many money is in the bank account.
Yes. So the only way that we know how much money is in that bank account is Dad has been getting, he has not done digital, he's been doing paper. And so we were able to get a paper bank statement that told us how much money was in the account.
Yeah, so there's a couple solutions, right? So either the most easier solution is to put another person in a joint bank account. So if anything happened to you, then another account holder can have the access to the bank account. But if it's a sole bank account, you can also make it payable on death. So if anything happened to you, and the bank will just write a check to your beneficiary.
Correct. And so a payable on death is something you can set up with your bank itself. And it's a type of bank account with that specialty ability so that if something were to happen to you, it goes ahead and pays out to a beneficiary or series of beneficiaries.
And the other solution is you can easily just say, who is the beneficiary on the bank account? And if anything happened, the bank will cut a check.
While those solutions may be simple, the actual easiest way to do anything is to hire an attorney and be able to set up a living trust, because everything we've been talking about is not something that a normal person will have thought about at all. And especially because a normal person probably doesn't sit and think about when they're going to pass.
Yeah.
You don't think about what's going to happen with these things. And I know that my father didn't, and that's why that he wasn't prepared at the end of the day. So being able to come to an attorney and have the attorney like us be able to worry about that and be able to make sure that you're taken care of so that things like this don't happen, I think is a very smart and focused solution for you to be able to have. And ultimately, that's what my dad wanted to do. It just didn't happen in time.
Right. It's kind of like happened without any plan. It's kind of like shocking news and no one is prepared. So that's the whole purpose of doing estate planning, is to prepare for the future, prepare for such things happen. Then you leave your families in this situation without knowing where are your assets, how are you going to get access to it, right? How are you going to get this sorted out?
Well, and that's another thing. So my dad had more than one bank account. And the reason that we know that is we're getting paper statements from at least 3 bank accounts.
Maybe he has more.
Perhaps he does. We don't know.
You don't know which bank.
Exactly. And so that's one of the
Maybe
things.
he has a bank account in Switzerland.
Yeah, we don't know. And so that's one of the things that estate planning is useful for. One of the things that we do is we create a list of all of the assets and accounts that you have. And it's important because when you pass, not only will we have come up with solutions for your assets, but there's a list for your family to be able to look at and know.
Right.
So
every
they're not
family
having to solve a puzzle.
Every family should have a family inventory list. You should have all your assets listed, and then you don't need to like personally telling your kids. Maybe you have multiple kids, right?
Yep,
you don't need to host like a family meeting and telling people that, oh, this is because those assets is always changing, and you're selling the house, you bought another house, and then you cancel this, you add another life insurance, right? It's better to keep something maybe on the shared Google Doc or something like that, and then it keep everyone updated.
Yep. And so that's one of the things that we do in our estate planning package is we will create an assets list for you. And if there is any reason that you can't find yours, we would have a copy. So there's always a backup copy that we would have as your attorney.
So a lot of clients, they ask, oh, I don't need to spend any money. I can just go to the bank and change the beneficiary, and I can, I can avoid probate that way. Why they need to do a trust and spend a couple of $1,000s?
So a living trust is something that we work with, and just so that I can explain kind of easily for anybody that's a potential customer. So the way that we work is a living trust is where you take the assets that you have during life and you place them into a trust. So the assets are benefiting you, however, they're owned by the trust and not you as an individual. And the reason that matters is when you pass, your assets go into your estate. And when they go into the estate, you have to go through the probate process. Probate, it takes a long time and it can be very expensive. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But on average, 4% of the value of the estate ends up being spent on probate costs. So in addition to your family having to worry about and go through the court process, they're also having to lose out on 4% of the value of your assets, which can be a significant amount of money. So when you add someone as a beneficiary, it may still go through part of the probate process in Texas. Whereas if you have a living trust, because technically the living person was a beneficiary of the trust and they're not the actual owner of the bank account, it's able to pass without going through and into the estate and without going through probate, and it will go to whoever the beneficiaries are.
Naming a beneficiary is an easy way to solve the problem, but it's not the best way to solve the problem.
It's not the best way, and it's also not a comprehensive solution. Because as we discussed, like you would be giving money to one over multiple possible children or people that you want to have.
But instead of having living trust, everything you direct all your assets to living trust, and then whatever your living trust say, who is beneficiary, who is going to get what. So everything goes to living trust.
It's correct. The other thing that you can do in a living trust that would be unique from a situation where you place someone on a bank account is in a living trust, you can state certain levels of beneficiaries will have a certain percentage, and then you could have a second level. So for instance, let's say that one of my siblings had passed before my dad had. You could state that the share for whichever sibling had passed would go to the children.
Go to the children, yeah. So, but if you did it in a simple way, then you have to remember, go back to the bank, change the beneficiary because the beneficiary died before you. Yep. So you have to constantly thinking to do this. But if you have multiple bank account, that's a lot of work, right? But if you have a simple living trust, you don't need to worry about that. You just need to sit down with attorney once and have everything planned out and have everything structured correctly.
So basically, you would only speak to your attorney once to be able to give your wishes for what you wanted to happen upon your passing.
Right.
The other thing that's great about working specifically with Springdale Law is we work with you when you have a living trust with us, and we will meet with you periodically. So if your wishes do change over time, so let's say you were to get rid of an asset, change your bank account, add a life insurance policy or anything like that, we meet with you periodically to update your trust information to make sure that it remains up to date so that it accurately reflects what your wishes are close to the time of your death. So if you were to decide that one of your children, if they predeceased you, or for whatever reason, you decided that you didn't want to give shares to that person, instead wanted to give to their children or their spouse or any number of people, you would be able to update that information with us as your attorneys, and we'd be able to update that for you with the bank without you having to go through all the different hassles of having to go to different places and create those new wishes.